the Vanderbilt family had more money than the US Treasury. Like, how baller are you when you're like, I can't store my money in the US, they don't have enough to handle me, I gotta move globally. And yet, 54 years after Cornelius died, the first Vanderbilt died broke. I believe we don't get a second chance to build a life that we love and create a legacy that lasts. And I love that the notion here and the concept here is living your legacy, not just leaving a legacy. And for a lot of you, you raised your hand that you read Killing Sacred Cows. The good news is that I'm not rehashing the concepts from that today. Some of you already came up and had me sign What Would the Rockefellers Do, and you've read that. The good news there is this talk is something that I haven't given to a group yet, but it's something that I've been living and researching and immersing in. See, yeah, in What Would the Rockefellers Do, there's this whole notion that the Vanderbilt family had more money than the US Treasury. Like, how baller are you when you're like, I can't store my money in the US, they don't have enough to handle me, I gotta move globally. And yet, 54 years after Cornelius died, the first Vanderbilt died broke. And even after Cornelius died, his oldest son doubled the estate in 9 years before he died. So think about this. The last Vanderbilt family reunion on record, there wasn't a single millionaire. Now, there could still be some Vanderbilt millionaires somewhere that don't want to go associate with that part of the family, but ultimately, they've destroyed one of the greatest amounts of wealth ever because they missed certain key components. The first thing is they didn't consider investing in human capital. They didn't consider passing on non-monetary assets, and therefore all the monetary assets were destroyed. It was a lot like the lottery syndrome, right? Like when you read about lottery winners, they really have great lives, don't they? You know, bankruptcy, jail. I mean, there's entire financial firms that the only thing these firms do is buy out the annuities from the lottery when they get into trouble. So, really happy endings all the time. I mean, by the way, just, you know, a little side note, the lottery is just a tax on the poor. That's all it really is. And it gets people, unfortunately, to think that wealth is a game of luck. It's not a game of luck. It's a very deliberate game that is born of value creation. See, value creation is the key catalyst when it comes to building wealth. And ultimately, if you want to have wealth or more financial capital, that's a byproduct. It's a byproduct of two more precious forms of capital. Like I just saw someone make some post saying it's not what you know, it's who you know. That's such a lie, because if you don't know anything, you don't get to be in this room. No one's like, hey, you bring nothing to the table, come hang out with us today, it's gonna be awesome. The only time that happens is if you're like born into family and they're like, I guess we have to bring Johnny, you know? It's gonna ruin everything, but he gets to come along for the day. So this equation I call the value equation comes down to two factors or precious forms of capital that drive all financial capital. The first one being your mental capital. Mental capital are your ideas, knowledge, wisdom, insights, tools, strategies. It's a world today it's an amazing time in history because it's no longer about brawn. It used to be that how strong you were determined how much money you had if you weren't born into a certain family, but we're now in the time of brains. And value comes from those insights and ideas. So you're here hopefully developing a lot of mental capital as part of it, but where most of the wealth in this world is stored, where it's hidden, where it's underutilized and unrecognized, is relationship capital. See, there's mental capital and relationship capital, and so I like to go old school. I know we got technology, but I'm gonna keep it old. Bill, is that cool? You know, like, good to see you, man. So, we got mental capital, multiplied by your relationship capital equals your financial capital. And so they had a lot of relationship capital in the Vanderbilt family without the mental capital. Therefore, the wealth was divided, destroyed, disseminated, and it's been dissipated. It doesn't exist anymore. As a matter of fact, Anderson Cooper is part of the Vanderbilt family, Gloria Vanderbilt being his mom. He had to fake press credentials to get into what he's doing today. Now, on one hand, like there's something about grit and there's something about, you know, coming from nothing and building something. And then it's the opposite of entitlement in a lot of ways, and I feel like it's a new challenge for this next generation, is we have so many conveniences and life can be so easy at times. Like back in the day, if you didn't do anything, you died, right? You didn't eat. You had to go hunt, you had to find the things. Today, you could smoke weed, play Xbox, not have a job, and there's still, the government puts food on your table. right? It's a little bit easier these days. So like my son the other day, like this is just an example. He's 11 years old, and he says, "Hey, Dad, are we rich?" I said, "I don't really know anything about you on that. I know I am. I think it's yet to be determined." You know, like we went to Italy, and when we're getting on the plane, you walk on, and I go, "Okay, kids, you're off there to the right. Mom and I are heading to the left. The left is where those lay-down seats are that you can sleep. The right is where coach is." And they're like, "Hey, that's unfair." I'm like, "You know what's unfair? That you're even part of this lucky sperm club and you'd be on the plane in the first place. Like, what does it take to sit up there?" I'm like, "You earn it. You buy it." All right? So I want to make sure that we abolish entitlement because we see within that Vanderbilt family what entitlement did. As a matter of fact, the Vanderbilt family owned the Breakers, which is a property in Rhode Island that's now owned by Rhode Island. They own the Biltmore estate in the Carolinas, not owned by them anymore. They actually own 10 properties in Manhattan that have been torn down and rebuilt into something else because they don't own that either. And the famous last words, according to the Google, that came from Cornelius was, "Keep the money together." They didn't do that because they didn't invest in human capital and they didn't have certain advantages. And so what I want to do today is stack the odds in your favor that you're not just passing on monetary wealth, which is actually the easy part, how to pass on money tax-free to future generations. The harder part is how do you make that legacy last without creating entitlement, without having them lose purpose, without having them go, "Yeah, I don't have to do this now because there's going to be money later." I mean, the worst situation is, anyone read that book, The Millionaire Next Door? Spoiler alert, if you haven't read it, I'm going to sum it up in about 30 seconds right now, okay? Here's what it says. If you're willing to be miserable and act like you're broke no matter how much money you make, you too can die a millionaire and watch your heirs blow it within a year. That's the summary of the book, essentially. Because if you don't have these conversations, if you don't live by example, if it's a big surprise, all of a sudden it becomes that lottery syndrome, right? So, going to this equation, mental capital times relationship capital equals financial capital. So Vanderbilt's had plenty of relationship capital without the mental capital. And by the way, if you want more money, or if you think you have a money problem, it's never really a money problem. That's just a symptom. Because first off, if you can write a check and it goes away, wasn't really a problem. Second, if you can't, the issue that you have is either a mental capital issue, not thinking about it properly, or a relationship capital issue, not hanging out with the right people. Like, I have a really easy formula on relationship capital. Brad, who's here hanging out, he knows this formula because we talk about it. See, I put people into 3 categories when it comes to relationship capital. Number 1 would be friendly, number 2 would be buddies, and number 3 would be friends. See, I spoke at this event once, and the person that introduced me, he said, "Our next speaker owns all of the skyscrapers in Salt Lake City." Now, I own 45% of a 3-story building. I don't know that that's all the skyscrapers or that that could even be considered a skyscraper, right? Then he said, "Every speaker at this event is one of his clients." Well, Tony Robbins was speaking. I've never even talked to him before. I could go through like the list of people that are speaking at this event. None of them were clients. And so when I got up, I go, I don't really know what to do, so I'm just going to say, I don't know which speaker was introduced. I look forward to meeting them or becoming them someday. And then I got in this place where I started to argue with the guy afterwards. I'm like, "You can never do that again. You can't do that. That's unacceptable," right? And I have this 45-minute argument. Fortunately, Norm said, if you argue with the people that are insane, you become insane. You should just stop those arguments. So it was extraordinarily helpful to have that conversation. But I gave it a second chance, and then when I went back, because I'm from Utah, this is even better. Because I'm from Utah, he goes, "You know what, our next speaker, last time I was with him in Utah, we kneeled down and prayed together." Now, I don't know where he's getting this from. I think he thinks I'm Mormon. I don't know if Mormons kneel down and pray. I may look like Jesus, but I'm not Jesus, actually. So I don't know if that was confusing him or something. But I'm like, here he is again, saying things that aren't true. And so rather than getting in a fight, rather than arguing, rather than try to change him, you know what I did? I just stopped going, and it went away. So we don't have to have all these arguments and fights with people that don't share your values, that don't share your vision, that don't want you to succeed. We had a friend once that during a cash crunch in our business told one of our other friends, "Ooh, I'm glad that Garrett's going through that. That's good," right? And I thought, well, I won't tell you exactly what I thought, but I think you can think what I thought. It started with a B, I think. But I was like, this is ridiculous. So we decided to become friendly with them, which meant cordial when I saw them, don't share anything important in my life, don't argue with them, don't ask for anything, say no to anything that they invite us to, and never invite them to anything again. And it worked. It was very easy, right? That's the friendly category. If you just become friendly, you set an example for not only yourself, but for anyone in your life of what you tolerate and don't tolerate, and you now have time to live your legacy. We're way too busy to deal with a-holes. That's the bottom line, right? So then the second category of buddies. I have a friend that is very, very successful, very eccentric, and so much fun to hang out with. Probably taught me more about quality of life than anything else. And when my wife and I were hanging out with him, you know, he's sitting there talking about some Netflix documentary that he's going to be part of, and he wants me to be part of it, and we should film this stuff together. And my wife's going, that sounded awesome. Are you going to do any of that? And I said, oh, hell no. No, we're just buddies. What would happen is I would do 99% of the work, he might do 1% of the work, and it may or may not work out. I just like hanging out with him, right? So it's cool to have buddies sometime. I came from a small coal mining town. I went hunting this year with one of my buddies that I've known since the first day I was born. He's 30 days older than me. We're not going to talk about business and vision. We're just going to have a good little time, and then I'm going to go back to this exciting part of my life that I took a little bit of a slice of a break from, because I'm still from a small coal mining town, so of course I went elk hunting. We're in Texas, so it's all good, right? You know? Now, the more important category is friends. And this friends means I invite them to things, I say yes to their invitations as often as I can, and I'm totally willing to do business with them because I share values with them. I'm willing to share my vision because they're going to be cheerleaders for it. They're going to be excited if I get there. They're not going to be the ones that are the naysayers or the doubters or that think that I'm weird or that they believe somehow from a scarcity paradigm and mindset that money's bad, evil, or wrong, that profit is evidence of deception or coercion, because I don't want to listen to those people. Not because I don't care about them, I just care about them from a distance. And now I've reserved my time for the very best relationships out there. And here's the thing about relationship capital. This is where most of your wealth exists that has yet to come to fruition and become financial capital. See, there's a bridge between these two things, mental and relationship capital. And that bridge is called business. That's what bridges it. I've had people say, you know what, my grandfather was the smartest person I ever met, but he didn't have any money, so your equation doesn't work. I'm like, yeah, he was probably great to your family, but the way you make money is go outside of the family and impact others, right? More reach or more depth. That's the impact equation. How do I reach more people, or do I most deeply impact the people that I'm reaching?